As we journey into the later years of life, relationships naturally shift like seasons changing in a quiet forest. The fiery passion of youth often softens into a gentler companionship, shaped by decades of shared joys, struggles, and milestones. But for many couples, this transition brings unexpected challenges, moments when the warmth of a once vibrant marriage begins to fade. What happens when a wife, after 40 years of standing side by side with her husband, feels a growing distance? As if he's become a stranger sharing her home. What causes a woman who once poured her heart into love to slowly withdraw, her warmth replaced by indifference, her affection cooling as if the love she cherished has slipped away like morning mist? Mrs. Helen, now 68, used to believe she had the kind of marriage others admired. No divorce ever threatened their bond. No affairs betrayed their vows. No loud arguments echoed through their modest ranch-style home in suburban Ohio. They raised 2 children, paid off their mortgage, and built a life that from the outside looked steady and secure. Yet somewhere along the way, something shifted. Helen found herself dreading their quiet evenings together. She no longer wanted to share her thoughts with George, her husband of 45 years. She stopped looking forward to their dinners, once filled with laughter and stories, now heavy with silence. One crisp autumn afternoon, as she sat alone on their porch, watching leaves fall, a question pierced her heart. Am I living with my husband? Or just an old acquaintance who shares my address? Love doesn't vanish in a single dramatic moment, like a door slamming shut. It erodes slowly, almost invisibly, through days without meaningful conversation, through glances that no longer carry warmth, through meals where the clink of silverware speaks louder than words. The scariest part of a marriage isn't the fights that flare and fade. It's when one partner is still there, sitting across the breakfast table, sleeping in the same bed, but the feeling of love, the spark that once bound them, has drifted away like a forgotten melody. For many women over 60, this quiet drift is a reality they face in silence, unsure if their feelings are valid or if they're alone in their longing for something more. For their husbands, it's often a mystery. Why the woman they've loved for decades seems distant, her smile less frequent, her presence less warm. Today, ElderlyTV invites you to explore 9 honest, often unspoken reasons why many women over 60 find themselves emotionally drifting from their husbands. These reasons aren't about blame, but about understanding the quiet forces that can pull a marriage apart over time. If you're a wife, this is a gentle reminder that your emotions, the ache, the longing are real and shared by many. If you're a husband, this is an invitation to pause, to listen, and to see your partner with fresh eyes, before the distance grows too wide to bridge. Let's walk through these stories together, with compassion and openness, to uncover what lies beneath the silence. Reason 1. The weight of unshared emotional and practical burdens. Loving someone for 40 years doesn't drain a woman's spirit, but carrying the weight of an entire household, emotionally and practically alone for those 40 years, that does. Mrs. Helen never thought of George as a bad man. He never shouted, never raised a hand, never strayed from their marriage. He was a quiet man, content to sit in his worn armchair, reading the morning paper or watching baseball on their old TV. George, a retired factory worker, prided himself on his steady routine, his predictable life. But Helen, she was the one who could never sit still, her mind always buzzing with the needs of their family. From the moment they married in 1970, Helen became the keeper of their household's rhythm. She remembered everything: who needed what medication, George's blood pressure pills, their daughter's asthma inhaler, when their son's orthodontist appointments were, the date the plumber needed to fix the leaky faucet, the deadline for the car insurance payment. She planned Thanksgiving dinners, organized family reunions, and kept track of when the dog needed its shots. No one ever handed her a list of these tasks. They simply fell to her because, as she learned early on, if she didn't remember, no one else would. For decades, Helen carried this mental load silently, her mind a constant checklist of responsibilities. She didn't mind at first. She loved her family and saw it as her role. She took pride in keeping their home running smoothly, in being the one everyone relied on. But as the years piled on, the weight grew heavier. She wasn't just managing tasks. She was holding the family's emotional world together, too. When their daughter Emily struggled with algebra in high school, Helen stayed up late helping her through tears and frustration. When George's mother passed away in 1995, Helen planned the funeral, sent thank-you notes to mourners, and sat with George through his grief, while quietly mourning her own mother-in-law, whom she'd loved like family. One chilly November evening, after a day spent coordinating a doctor's visit for their grandson, grocery shopping, and paying the utility bills online, Helen sat at the kitchen table, her shoulders slumped. She looked at George engrossed in his newspaper and wished for one thing, a simple question. "Are you tired, honey, or is there anything I can do to help?" She didn't need him to take over everything, just to notice the weight she carried. But George didn't ask. He assumed she had it all under control, that she was the strong one who never faltered. And because he assumed, he never learned how to share the load. A 2021 study by the American Psychological Association found that women in long-term marriages often report feeling overwhelmed by invisible labor, the mental and emotional tasks that go unnoticed but accumulate over time. For Helen, it wasn't just the tasks that wore her down. It was the realization that George didn't see how much they cost her. He didn't see the nights she lay awake, mentally reviewing the next day's to-do list. He didn't see the quiet moments when she wondered if her efforts mattered to anyone. Many men don't understand this. A woman doesn't age because of wrinkles or gray hair. She ages from carrying the entire family on her shoulders, year after year in silence. Love doesn't fade because the romance dies. It fades when one person bears the weight alone, with no one stepping in to lift even a small part of it. Now Helen no longer complains. She no longer points out the tasks piling up. She still manages everything. The appointments, the bills, the family's needs. But her heart is quietly stepping back from the marriage that once defined her life. George, meanwhile, sits in his armchair, unaware of the distance growing between them, believing their quiet routine is a sign of peace. Reason 2. Lack of emotional and physical connection. Mrs. Linda can't recall the last time her husband, Tom, held her hand with intention. Not a fleeting brush while passing the butter dish, but a warm, deliberate clasp, the kind that used to make her heart skip a beat in their early years. Every night they climb into their queen-sized bed, Tom on the left, Linda on the right. She turns her back, not out of anger, but because there's nothing left to say. No fights disrupt their routine. No harsh words linger in the air. Yet between them lies a chasm, not measured in the inches of their mattress, but in the silence that neither knows how to bridge. In the 1980s, when they were newlyweds, Tom called her my girl with a grin that lit up her world. At crowded neighborhood barbecues, he'd slip his arm around her waist, making her blush with pride as neighbors smiled. Those moments were promises of love, of connection, of being seen. Now their evenings are marked by two predictable phrases. "Did you lock the door and turn off the light?" The words are practical, necessary, but they carry no trace of the man who once made Linda feel like the center of his universe. Society often assumes that intimacy fades with age, that older couples don't crave closeness the way younger ones do. But for women like Linda, the opposite is true. As the years pass, a hug, a tender glance, or a kind word becomes even more vital, a reminder that they still exist in someone's heart. A 2019 AARP survey found that 67% of women over 60 reported craving emotional connection more than physical intimacy, longing for small gestures that show they matter. A warm touch, a shared laugh, a moment of being truly seen. These are the threads that keep a marriage alive. An elderly therapist once shared a profound truth. Women don't pull away from marriage because the spark in the bedroom fades. They pull away when they're no longer touched with emotion. Linda didn't need grand gestures. She missed the little things Tom used to do without thinking. The way he'd catch her eye when she wore a new dress. The gentle squeeze of her hand as they walked through the grocery store. The quiet, "This soup's as good as ever," when she served his favorite chicken noodle. Those moments made her feel alive, loved, cherished. Now Tom still sits across from her at their oak dining table, still sleeps beside her in their shared bed. But Linda feels like a shadow in her own home, faint, overlooked, and no longer needed in the way she once was. She wonders if Tom even notices her anymore, or if she's become just part of the furniture. a familiar but unremarkable piece of their shared life. Last month when she bought a new sweater, hoping he'd comment, he didn't even look up from his phone. The silence stung more than any argument ever could. From Tom's perspective, their marriage is fine. No fights, no drama. He loves Linda, but he doesn't see the need for the gestures he once offered so freely. To him, their routine is comfortable, a sign they've made it through the hard years. But for Linda, that comfort feels like emptiness. A reminder that the man who once saw her so clearly no longer does. Reason 3. Unresolved conflicts that build distance. No one walks away from a marriage because of one fight. Mrs. Susan wrote in her journal, after her first therapy session at age 64. They walk away because they weren't heard 100 times. Susan isn't quick to anger, nor does she hold grudges. But she's no longer the young bride who swallowed her frustrations to keep the peace. For years, she tried to talk to her husband, Robert, about the things that weighed on her heart. The weekend plans he promised but canceled. The anniversary dates he forgot. The times she needed to share a worry. Like when their son lost his job, only to be met with silence or a dismissive "it'll be fine." In their early years, Susan would argue, her voice rising with hope that Robert would understand her perspective. When that didn't work, she tried gentle reminders, nudging him to see how his actions hurt her. Eventually, she stopped trying. Not because she forgave him, but because she realized Robert wasn't truly listening. He was waiting for his turn to respond, or worse, tuning her out entirely. Each unheard moment built a wall brick by brick, until the space between them felt like a canyon. Many couples live this way for decades, avoiding outright conflict, but losing the thread of connection. They exist in a fragile peace. No shouting matches, no slammed doors, but a relationship cracked beneath the surface. A 2020 study from the Gottman Institute, a leading authority on relationships, found that couples who stop engaging in honest conversations and avoid resolving conflicts don't typically divorce right away. Instead, they drift apart emotionally over 3 to 5 years, until the bond is little more than a habit, a routine held together by familiarity. Susan knows this pattern intimately. She speaks less now, not because she's tired, but because she refuses to cast her words into a void. Last summer, when she tried to share her worry about their granddaughter's health, Robert nodded absently, his eyes on the TV. The dismissal hurt more than she could say, so she stopped saying anything at all. She once believed silence was the key to harmony, a way to keep their marriage steady. Now she sees that silence, stretched too long, can choke the life out of love. Robert, for his part, thinks their marriage is stable. He loves Susan and assumes their lack of arguments means everything is fine. He doesn't realize that her silence isn't peace, it's resignation. Susan wonders how many other women sit across from their husbands, smiling politely while their hearts quietly retreat, yearning to be heard. Reason 4. The wife grows, the husband stays still. Mrs. Rosa, 64, always thought she was fortunate. Her husband, Frank, never raised a hand to her, never drank heavily, never vanished without explanation. He was a steady provider, a man who showed up every day. But there was one thing about Frank that never changed. Not once in their 40 years together. He stayed rooted in the habits and mindset of the man she married in '83, unwilling to step into the present. When Rosa suggested joining a yoga class to ease her arthritis, Frank chuckled. "You're too old for that nonsense." When she started cooking plant-based meals, hoping to improve their health after Frank's cholesterol scare, he shook his head. "White rice and fried fish have kept me alive this long." She proposed a weekend trip to the Smoky Mountains to reconnect. He called it a waste of money. When she handed him a smartphone, suggesting he try texting their grandkids, he laughed. "If I can make a call, that's all I need." His world was fixed, comfortable, unchanging, and he saw no reason to step outside it. In their early years, Rosa accepted this as just how men were. She loved Frank's steadiness, his reliability as a high school math teacher. But as she entered her 60s, with time feeling more finite, Rosa began to crave a partner who didn't just share her home, but shared her growth. She wanted to explore new hobbies, like watercolor painting, learn new skills, like using Zoom to chat with her book club, and embrace the years they had left. A 2022 Pew Research study found that women over 60 in the U.S. are increasingly seeking personal growth through classes, travel, or new perspectives, and are more willing to distance themselves from relationships that hold them back. Rosa shared her frustration at a women's group at her church. It's not that I've changed. It's that I can't keep living with someone who still thinks like it's 1985. She's tired of coaxing Frank out of his familiar recliner, of hearing the same stories about his old teaching days repeated like a worn-out record. She waited for years, hoping he'd meet her halfway. Maybe join her for a walk, try a new recipe, or ask about her painting. Now she's stopped waiting, because if she keeps waiting, she wonders, when will she ever get to live the life she's still yearning for? Frank, meanwhile, doesn't see the problem. He loves Rosa and thinks their routine is comfortable, a reward for their years of hard work. He doesn't understand why she's suddenly restless, why she can't just be content with the life they've built. But for Rosa, that contentment feels like stagnation, a life half-lived. Reason 5. Financial freedom means women no longer have to endure. My mother stayed with my father until her last day, Mrs. Susan said, her voice soft but steady as she sat in her retirees' book club. Not because she was happy, but because she had no choice. Susan's mother, born in the 1920s, depended on her husband for everything: money, a home, social standing. Leaving wasn't an option, no matter how heavy the silence grew. But Susan, now 65, lives in a different world. She loves Robert, her husband of 42 years. But she knows something her mother never did. She has the power to choose. Today's women over 60 are different from their mothers and grandmothers. Many, like Susan, have pensions from careers as teachers, nurses, or office workers. They have savings accounts in their own names, credit cards they manage themselves, and the confidence to sign a lease or book a trip without a husband's approval. They don't need to endure a hollow marriage, just to maintain the appearance of peace in the eyes of neighbors or family. A 2023 AARP survey revealed that 62% of women who divorced after 60 didn't cite infidelity or abuse as their reason. Instead, they said, "I was strong enough to choose a different life, one that felt true to me." Susan hasn't left Robert, but she's carved out a life that's increasingly her own. She no longer waits for him to ask how her day was, to notice the new book she's reading. She doesn't hide her tears when he brushes off her concerns about their son's struggles. Instead, she fills her days with meaning. She attends a weekly painting class, volunteers at the local library, and laughs with friends in her retirees' women's group. She's learned to use Uber to get around, searches Google for new vegetarian recipes, and manages her own retirement account. She doesn't feel left behind, like so many women of her mother's era. From Robert's perspective, their marriage is fine. No big fights, no major issues. He loves Susan and assumes she's content, because she's always been the strong one. He doesn't see her growing independence as a sign of distance. He thinks it's just her keeping busy. But for Susan, that independence is a lifeline. It's not that she's stopped loving Robert. It's that she's learned to love herself more, enough to refuse a life of just getting by. When a woman discovers her own worth, when she realizes she can stand on her own, she no longer stays in a marriage out of habit or fear. Susan's independence isn't a rejection of love. It's a declaration that she deserves to live fully ici, then if that means living more separately within her marriage. Reason 6. Therapy and self-love. Culture awaken women. Mrs. Helen used to believe that. Silence was the glue that held a marriage together, keeping quiet, smoothing over conflicts, and putting her family's needs first. That was how you kept peace. She learned it from her mother, who learned it from her grandmother. A good wife endures. Then at 67, Helen met a therapist who changed everything. "Silence isn't peace," the therapist said gently, her words landing like a soft rain on parched ground. "It's a scream buried inside you." Those words cracked open a door in Helen's heart, one she hadn't even known was locked. For the first time in over 4 decades, Helen did something just for herself. She signed up for a morning meditation class at the community center, a small act of rebellion against her routine of caring for everyone else. She started visiting the local library every Tuesday, losing herself in novels about women finding their voices and memoirs of people rediscovering joy in later life. She bought a journal with a floral cover and began writing, first hesitantly jotting down stray thoughts, then pouring out emotions she hadn't shared with anyone, not even George. Through these small steps, she learned a truth her mother's generation rarely spoke. Loving others doesn't mean erasing yourself. In the past, women like Helen's mother and grandmother were praised for their endurance, for sacrificing their own needs to keep the family intact. Today, therapists call that generational trauma, a legacy of silent suffering passed down through the years. A 2022 article in Psychology Today noted that the rise of self-care culture is empowering millions of women over 60 to reject the idea that they must tough it out for the sake of others. They're learning they can heal, that they deserve to live with lightness and joy no matter their age. Helen still shares a home with George. But now, each morning she sits before her bedroom mirror, breathing deeply in meditation, centering herself before the day begins. Each evening she reads under a soft lamp in the living room, no longer waiting for George to suggest they watch his favorite game show. She's learning to pay attention to her own heart, sometimes before she even thinks about his dinner. Last week she planted a small herb garden in their backyard, a quiet joy that belongs to her alone. When a friend asked her, "Do you still love your husband?" Helen paused, then smiled. "Yes," she said, "but I don't love by giving up pieces of myself anymore. I love by keeping myself whole." George notices Helen's new routines, but doesn't quite understand them. He loves her, but he assumes she's just going through a phase. He doesn't see that her self-care is a lifeline, a way to reclaim the parts of herself she lost over decades of prioritizing others. For Helen, it's not about leaving, it's about living. Reason 7. Husbands age, but don't always mature. Growing old together is one thing. Growing up together is another. Some men age in years but remain emotionally stuck, their habits and perspectives frozen in time like an old photograph. And as Mrs. Linda, now 66, has learned, that kind of immaturity isn't as charming as it was in youth. She never expected her husband, Tom, to transform into someone new. But she also never imagined that at this stage of life, he'd still act as if the entire household was her responsibility. Tom doesn't know how to log into their online banking to check their savings. He forgets his annual checkup unless Linda writes it on the calendar. Last winter, when Linda was bedridden with the flu, Tom stood in the kitchen puzzled, unable to make himself a simple breakfast of toast and eggs. In their younger days, Linda found his reliance on her endearing, a sign of their partnership. She was the organizer, he was the provider. Now it feels like a weight one she's tired of carrying alone. Linda joined a wellness class at the YMCA to stay active and meet new friends. Tom called it a waste of good time. She suggested visiting old college friends in Michigan to rekindle memories. He grumbled, "Why bother with all that small talk?" His days revolve around the same routine, watching cable news, rereading old newspapers, retelling stories about his days as a car salesman in the 80s, oblivious to the world moving forward outside their door. Living with someone who has nothing new to say, Linda whispered at a widow's support group, though she's not a widow, is a loneliness you can't explain. A 2021 Stanford University study found that in long-term marriages, when one partner continues to grow, learning new skills, exploring new interests, while the other remains stagnant, the resulting imbalance is a leading cause of emotional distance. Linda doesn't need Tom to be perfect. She just wishes he'd ask, "How was your class today, honey?" Or, "That dish you made last night was great. What was it?" Or even, "Can you show me how to use that banking app?" But he doesn't ask. And Linda, weary of explaining, has stopped offering. Tom, for his part, thinks their life is fine. He loves Linda and assumes their routine is what retirement is supposed to be: quiet, predictable, comfortable. He doesn't see her wellness classes or her new friendships as signs of growth. He thinks she's just keeping busy. But for Linda, that routine feels like a cage a life, where her growth is stifled by his refusal to move forward. The distance between them isn't born of arguments. It's born of a quiet refusal to grow in a life that's slipping by faster with each passing day. Reason 8. Clashing values after 60. "We don't fight," Mrs. Rosa said, her voice tinged with a wry smile, as she sat at her church's women's group. "We just live side by side, like two radios tuned to completely different stations." Rosa and Frank fell in love in their 20s because they shared a vision. Work hard, raise good kid, save for a modest home in their small Indiana town. For years, those goals kept them aligned, their lives intertwined like threads in a sturdy quilt. They raised 3 children, paid off their house, and celebrated their 40th anniversary with a quiet dinner. But once the kids were grown, the mortgage paid, and the days stretched long. Rosa realized they no longer had a shared purpose to talk about. At 64, Rosa discovered meditation, finding peace in quiet moments of reflection at the local community center. She read books on psychology, embraced plant-based eating after watching a documentary on heart health, and began decluttering their home, drawn to a simpler, more intentional life. She joined a book club, started volunteering at a local food pantry, and even took up bird watching, delighted by the cardinals that visited their backyard. Frank, meanwhile, sank deeper into his routine. Hours spent watching political talk shows, grumbling about kids these days being spoiled, or warning that too many vegetables will make you sick. His world was anchored in the past, in opinions formed when Reagan was president, and he saw no need to question them. Rosa doesn't mind differences of opinion. She enjoys a lively debate, a chance to see the world through another's eyes. But living with someone whose perspective is locked in time, who dismisses her evolving interests as foolish, feels suffocating. "I'm not afraid of disagreeing," she told her church group. "I'm afraid of living with someone who's closed off to anything new." Last month, when she suggested they try a vegan restaurant in town, Frank scoffed, "I'm not eating rabbit food." The rejection wasn't just about the meal. It was about her desire to grow, to explore, to live. A 2022 Pew Research survey found that after age 60, many American couples discover their values have diverged, whether about lifestyle priorities or how to spend their remaining years. This clash is a leading cause of emotional divorce, where partners remain legally married but live emotionally separate lives. Rosa hasn't filed for divorce, but she set up a small desk in the guest room where she reads and writes. She eats her plant-based meals alone, savoring the quiet. She chooses silence when Frank launches into another rant about the state of the world. "Loving someone," she said softly, "doesn't mean you have to live forever in their world, especially when it no longer has a place for you." Frank loves Rosa and thinks their differences are just how things are after so many years. He doesn't understand why she's pulling away, why she seems less interested in their old routines. But for Rosa, those routines are a reminder that the man she loves is no longer her partner in growth. Reason 9. Loneliness within the marriage. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about sitting across from someone who no longer sees you. For Mrs. Helen, now 68, this truth has settled into her bones like a winter chill. Every morning, George sits at their kitchen table, sipping coffee from the same chipped mug he's used for 20 years. He still asks sleep well in a voice that's more habit than curiosity. He doesn't wait for her answer. They eat dinner together, the same meatloaf and mashed potatoes they've had for decades. But he doesn't recall what she said about her day, or if she said anything at all. Helen lives with her husband, but she feels invisible, untouched, unheard, unneeded. Last spring, she told him, "I'm so tired," her voice trembling with the weight of years. He replied, "Then rest," and turned back to his newspaper, never asking why her heart felt so heavy. He didn't sit beside her, didn't reach for her hand. That moment, and countless others like it, left an ache she couldn't name. She remembers the early days, when George would pull her close during a walk in the park, his laughter warm against her ear. Now she wonders if he even sees her sitting across from him. Some days, Helen feels an emptiness that isn't just about George's distance. It's about her own realization she's lost the will to keep trying. She used to push, to hope, to believe that if she just said the right thing, he'd see her again. Now she's not so sure. A 2003 Harvard Health Publishing report notes that prolonged loneliness in a seemingly stable marriage is a silent but powerful cause of emotional breakdown after 60. It's not the absence of love that breaks a heart. It's the absence of connection. Helen no longer cries over George. She doesn't expect a miraculous change. Instead, she's learning to care for herself, to live lighter, to find joy in small moments that belong to her alone. She tends a small herb garden in their backyard, savoring the scent of basil and thyme. She reads poetry at night, underlining lines that speak to her soul. She joins friends for coffee at a local diner, laughing in a way she hasn't in years. Some marriages don't end in divorce papers. They end in a silence so deep, so long, that neither partner knows how to break it. George loves Helen, but he doesn't understand why she seems distant. He assumes their quiet life is what retirement is supposed to be, comfortable, predictable. He doesn't see that her gardening, her poetry, her coffee dates are her way of surviving, the loneliness of their marriage. For Helen, it's not about leaving, it's about finding herself again. These 9 reasons aren't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. They're about understanding why a wife, after decades of devotion, might quietly retreat into herself, her heart stepping back from a marriage that no longer feels like home. Love doesn't fade because of age. It fades when we stop seeing each other, stop listening, stop reaching out with the warmth and care we once promised. The women in these stories, Helen, Linda, Susan, Rosa, haven't stopped loving their husbands. They've simply grown weary of being lonely in their own marriages, of pouring their hearts into a bond that no longer nourishes them. If you're a wife reading this, know that you're not alone. Your feelings, the quiet ache, the longing to be seen, are shared by countless women who've walked this path. You're not wrong for wanting more, for craving a connection that feels alive. Even in your later years, if you're a husband, this is a gentle nudge to pause, to look at the woman beside you, and to ask one simple question. Are you still okay, honey? That small act. Listening, truly listening, might be the first step toward bridging the gap. Try sitting with her over coffee, asking about her day, or holding her hand during a quiet evening walk. These small gestures can rekindle a spark that's been dimmed by time. Relationships in our later years can be a source of profound joy, a chance to rediscover each other with the wisdom of time, but they require effort, openness, and a willingness to grow together. A 2024 study by the National Institute on Aging found that couples who actively work to reconnect through shared activities, open communication, or even couples therapy report higher satisfaction in their marriages after 60. It's never too late to rebuild, to listen, to see each other anew. ElderlyTV thanks you for joining us on this journey of reflection. If these stories touched your heart, if they stirred a memory or a hope, please subscribe to our channel. Share this with someone you love, a spouse, a friend, a family member. Let's continue this conversation about healing, about love, about finding each other again in the quiet, meaningful years of life. Together, we can rediscover the beauty of connection, one small step at a time.